welcome back to a new kind of conversation series, trying to keep things flowing here on New Paradigm Conversations. So we're reimagining together new paradigm societies every week. And today I have a very, very good friend and wonderful coach and brilliant, brilliant mind, Breean Miller, who is joining me as a co-host, co-imaginer on what the new paradigm of work, quote unquote work, could really look like, and what opportunities we have right now and what we have to let go of. And Bree is specifically working on some very interesting projects right now. So Bree, do you mind introducing yourself quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm here on a mission to help leaders step up and show up as healers within their teams, organizations, and communities. And I'm doing that right now through a company I'm a co-founder and chief product and brand officer at, Habits That Work. We really work with leaders and teams to help them create new habits so that they can show up differently. Mm-hmm. And then separately, I also work one-on-one and in small groups with female leaders to help them step as healers through my company called Muse and Method. And I've been doing that healing work for a short period of time, but I feel like it's really what I'm here to do. And I'm just so excited to talk about this subject overall. Carly, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Let's do it. Let's just have a wandering conversation on all the really interesting paths involved, all the bridges. So Bria has a wonderful phrase that she's been using too. Can you share that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do is I really help people spot and kind of uncover and reveal limiting patterns that they have and turn those patterns into possibilities. And the way that we do that together is to actually build a billion tiny little bridges to create micro shifts and tiny little changes over time to integrate into a new version of themselves. So yeah, build a billion tiny bridges. I love it.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, and relevant for both obviously individuals who are moving into a new paradigm of themselves and shifting their own patterns and into new possibilities. And as a collective, what we're doing here, building all the little bridges of all the different guides and what we can do as we start to emerge into a new paradigm together. Mm-hmm. And so let's just kind of have some fun. Well, let's start with, what does it mean for you at this moment in time, helping especially female leaders, business leaders, and kind of making the shift into healers for their businesses? Let's just talk about what that means to you right now and what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's something that I've come to recently because it's something that I'm doing myself within my own company. And I've been on a wild journey of personal development for many years, but especially the last, I would say 3 to 4 years have been an incredible trajectory for me and how I show up in my life and at work and as a leader in my company and in the world. And what I've recognized recently is that really pulling together what my vision for business can be and how I can be a leader in my business, it really requires this role of being a healer. Okay, so let me unpack that for a second because that was very big. I believe that business has such a huge influence on our society. I think that goes beyond a belief. It's pretty real for all of us. As a reality, the business really shapes our world right now. And I think that more than any other societal structure that we've got, it has the potential to change faster and influence more. It goes across countries, it reaches all types of people, and it has such an impact right now. And I feel like what is so needed, of course, is systemic change and a real rethinking of what business is, what society is, this new paradigm that you're talking about, which I hope we get to dig in a little bit more. But I really think that one of the things that's going to be a tipping point for business to be different is for leaders to show up differently.
Yes.
So I think that when we get those in positions of influence and those that can shape business and therefore shape our world and our reality, we get them to show up from a place of abundance and generosity and compassion and love, that we can be limitless in terms of what we can have business contribute to the world instead of what it feels like a lot of that it's doing right now, which is take away. So I think that for me personally, you know, I've been collecting all these experiences and personal development work. And I recognized in myself that I'm not just here to like manage a team of people or to be a leader or to stay stuck within even my own world of my own company. I really want to show up for myself as a healer, do that work for myself, selfishly and selflessly. And then I want to be that role for the other people on my team. I want to help them heal and integrate and be the best versions of themselves so that they can have a bigger contribution and our company can have a bigger contribution. And more recently, I just had the realization, trying to think about who I really wanted to work with from a healing perspective. And of course, you know, I went all over the place with different audiences I could work with. And it really struck me, who I want to help is me 5 years ago, me a year ago, me 3 months ago. And that means like finding strength in your vulnerability and finding a balance between masculine and feminine. And honestly, bringing a balance for like tangible and intangible, invisible things. And so it was like, duh, reimagine the leader as a healer in the business. So that's kind of the short story of how I got there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. And I think, I want to look at it in a few different levels also, because we have the individual, which I completely agree. We can't move into any kind of new paradigm until we start to find it within ourselves, which is a healing journey. And as we look at leadership being less about bossing people around and more about stepping into our own self-leadership, and that is a healing process. And the idea that we can't really imagine or manifest anything other than old paradigm concepts and ways of being until we find that within ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're starting specifically with leaders at this, at their organizations. Before we talk about what the new paradigm of business really is, should be, needs to change completely. Right, we'll get into that. But the fact that we're still in normal businesses, people still need to make money, they still need to make profit, blah, 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 blah. So that considering we can change how we show up, what resistance do you find that, or do you, even just examining your own journey?
Yeah.
The resistance to becoming a healer or seeing leadership that way.
Well, I think you pointed to it a second ago, which is the act of being a leader and showing up as a healer is a healing journey. Like that is personal development at its finest if you let it be. Yeah. Okay. So like opening yourself to all of the things that you can get triggered by, root out as patterns that no longer serve you. I mean, I think where we do our best, deepest, richest personal inner work is in our relationships with others, and the complexity of the relationships you have as a leader at different levels of the organization, inside and outside of your company. There is just so much, like there's a universe there of avenues you could go down for personal development. So I feel like the role of a leader, looking at it that way, as opposed to showing up thinking that you got to where you are because you did a good job at something else and that you know everything, you have all of the answers, and you're there as the person to tell everyone the right way to do things, instead of looking at being a leader that way and looking at it as more of, how do I actually serve the people around me? How can I help them see things they can't see? How do I help them stay on purpose, be more intentional, grow as individual humans, as opposed to treating them as a population? I feel like there's just such a disjoint in terms of like how you can view your role as a leader. And then I feel like you asked kind of a multi-layered question there, and I'm trying to remember the second part of it. Honestly, I got myself a little bit off topic there.
No, you didn't. I just always ask like 10 questions in one.
I had a moment there, and I was like, I forget the rest of the question.
I'll try to go revisit. Yeah. Well, everyone, there's so much in, yes, just changing our entire view, our perception of leadership completely is the beginning, the beginning of that journey. And I'd love to add on to that as well, even as you're speaking, and what's so important in all of these dialogues, and especially in today's climate, is understanding that every single person is a leader. And so we have, if you have the title or you have the role, or it's your company or you have a team and you seem to like look more like a leader than, you know, more traditional in that way, then like, yeah, you really got to get on your shit. You know, I've got like collapse.
You do. You've got a ghost or something going on in the background. I don't know what it is.
I don't know either. So
you're inspiring back there. I don't know. No, thank you for the refresh, because that was exactly what I was thinking when you said that you don't have to be someone that manages people or someone that is high up within an organization. Everyone can be a leader. Everyone. And okay, so what does that mean? I think from my perspective, it means that life is not happening to you, that you are a cause in the matter, that you are creating your future through the way that you speak to yourself and to others, and the way that you literally show up and what your energy is and what you embody. You're actually creating what you want in the world through the space that you show up as. And I think that, like, you know what you're about. You know what you're here for. You know what your purpose is, and you show that by being your purpose, no matter where you are within an organization. I think for me, that's a leader. That's someone who's really clear on their contribution, no matter where they sit within an organization, that they're not looking to someone else. What do I do next? Why am I here? Someone else needs to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to like look up to this other person. Like, every single person within an organization, no matter their years of experience, tenure, role, has something to offer. And I feel like we can all recognize that from a humble perspective and not an egoic perspective, that like we're arrogant and we think we know more than we do, that everyone can be that type of new paradigm leader. Someone who is generous and open and self-aware and is not worried about if someone else wins that they lose. Like, we're all kind of working on this together.
Yeah. That's an old paradigm belief system at this point, I do think, very intentionally designed to divide. And yeah, definitely really important. Win-lose is it's only a truth when you make it a truth. Otherwise, it is always actually a win-win. We're always completing each other. We either choose to complete or we choose to compete. And so everyone's a leader. Everything is about how you show up. Now, when we look at it in business specifically, because, you know, we talk so much, you and me, about, you know, the integration and new paradigm is truly not segmenting out our lives, right? It's not like, well, I'm going to be a leader at home, but not in the office, or a leader in my own life, but I don't care how I behave at the grocery store. You know, it's not, we're integrating. So every single place that you show up, but every environment, because we're making the bridges right now, we're not there yet, quite. And every environment does have its own challenges. The resistance of moving into a new paradigm way of being or of leading. So I'd love to just kind of look at when it comes to, I'll just ask two questions in one. So I'll look at it, whichever one speaks to you first.
I remember your other question now. It was about resistance. There we go. See?
Yeah, I'll come back. We're going to circle back. So at the individual level and at the business level. So right, so there's, let me give you an example of that. As a female leader, male leader too, either one. But we tend to be more stuck in this win-lose sort of toxic masculine energy tends to dominate in the business world.
Yeah.
And when you think of, so as an individual, the resistance that we can feel within ourselves when we think, no, I have to compete. No, it doesn't work that way. No, my profit margins are going to fall. No, right? Like all of those resistance things. And for you on your personal journey, what resistance you had to seeing leadership this way and to seeing it as leading. And then, we can look at it also from a larger, just like, well, let's just start there.
Yeah, I'm ready to dig in. So I think that there are these cycles that keep repeating themselves. And one of them happens to be the phenomenon of like the sole woman that gets to be in a leadership position because she's had to literally scrape and scrabble and climb her way to the top to break through a glass ceiling of some sort. And then she gets to be there and looking down at all of the other women, she now has this feeling of, I fought to get here. You have to do the same thing. It's how it works.
Mm.
And I feel like that's a cycle. So then we've got women who are now in positions of influence and power within organizations. And some of them are working to break that cycle. And some of them are still stuck in this, I would say, more like a victim approach to seeing what it takes to be a leader, which is that the way it works is that you literally have to sacrifice your life. You have to work and toil and put in the effort and pay your dues and put in all the hours and scrape and scrabble and play politics and pretend like people are more interesting than they are and be part of the boys club or whatever it was that they had to do to get to where they are now. And this cycle keeps repeating. And I love this. I know you and I, Carly, have had many conversations about how unfair it is that the victim of a trauma, whatever that trauma is, whether it is having to literally sacrifice your life to get to a position of leadership, or it's something much more, capital T trauma that happens to you, or even something more significant. The unfairness of breaking the cycle of trauma is that the person that was in the victim role has to be the one that says, this stops with me.
Exactly.
They unfairly have to stop the cycle before they then become the perpetrator to the next person in the victim role. And that is a really easy cycle to get into. And that's something that I've watched over and over and over again. And I'm speaking specifically, of course, for women in leadership and what I've witnessed. And it's really easy to fall into these well-worn paths. Even if the paths are narrow and few, they are well-worn at this point. But there's some recognition that we have to have, not only when we reach the leadership position, but on our way to it, that we can actually be different. And there's some education and some compassion that has to be had for the women that came before us. And those women are incredible and have continued to create a well-worn path for us. But, and, however we want to put that, and it's time now for them to soften.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's time for all of us to soften in the way that we show up, in the way that we treat each other, and in the way that we create space for who's coming next.
Right. Right.
So I think I've encountered that a lot as a form of resistance. It's where you look to the most to find support and compassion. And yet there is that competing aspect that you mentioned versus the completing aspect. And I think in a new paradigm leadership world, everyone is an individual There is no lumping people together. And as a result, everyone's leadership should look different. And there is no one way to success, one way to a position of influence or leadership. And there is no one position. Like we just talked about, everyone can be a leader. And I feel like one of the things that I have personally experienced coming at me, but I'm sure I've been the perpetrator of, is having a lack of respect all around and a lack of awareness and compassion. And so I think the more that we work on self-awareness and personal development and opening up to new ways of doing things, new ways of being at work, the more we can have compassion with ourselves for how we've gotten to where we are, how we've recognized, well, perhaps this is not going to get me to where I'd like to be next, how we can be reflective about those patterns that no longer serve us. We can also then be a mirror for other people. We can show and demonstrate there's a different way to do things, and we can have the compassion and hold the space for other people to get there, whatever their position is.
Exactly.
I just feel like that's so critical.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to take a second, actually, because I think it's so important. And it's one of, when we talk about breaking these patterns, the fear of, if you've had to fight and sacrifice, right? So the system, the stories and systems currently, and we see this for men and women. This is nothing to, it's just what we're surrounded by. You want to be a millionaire? Yes, you can. Give up your life.
Yeah.
Give up your life. You got to make these hard choices. You got to fight harder than anybody else. And we are inundated with this storytelling. We are inundated also with, if you open up and try to help somebody else, they'll take you down, right? So we also have this huge survival fear of attack, fear of, if I soften and they don't, then, well, thank you very much, right? Yep. And I would love to just, that's, I think, one of our key areas that we have to work through and talk about humility and transcendence, and how, for you, how you've kind of opened that softening spot in yourself. And I know for me, it's been a similar thing of how do we let go of, understand that other people are going to still be stuck in their patterns, and it's okay. They might attack you. It's okay. They might. How have you kind of worked through that sort of, because it is a reality, right? We're all programmed into these patterns and into these stories and systems right now. So it's just, we all have it, and you can break it, but what if somebody else doesn't?
There are so many narratives out there that are just so confusing. If I see on Shark Tank one more time Mark Cuban going like this, when somebody's like, I mortgaged my house and I didn't pay myself for 2 years and I didn't sleep for 8 weeks and I sold all these things on my own. How are any of those things reasonable for starting a business? Why are the stakes so ridiculous to create something of value in this country or the society?
Aren't we a high society?
Why are
a better world?
Why are we praising struggle as a means to success? Literally. So one of the patterns that I have been really working with for my own personal development has been to realize, especially in this last year, and my role in leadership and the evolution of that is really what allowed me to confront this. It was, my worth is related to my work and how much I produce.
How much we produce. That is so true. And that is a really big, thank you for bringing that one up.
Which is, let me just say, a mind puzzle these days, because more and more we're producing intangible work. So it's not like, here are the 10 presentations or here are the 10 widgets I did. Look at what I created. Sometimes there's not a deliverable for months or years, depending on what product or company you're working in. So it becomes such a paralyzing, stressful, overwhelming,
it's horrible
world to live in, to feel like you're constantly having to prove that you're doing things, you're producing things of value, and that is what you're measured by. This idea that we have to earn a living is ridiculous. Like, no, how about we have value because we exist? How about that? How about that? And how about if, like, I'm over here as a leader working through my work is my worth, and then I uncover underneath that, what's actually underneath that is that I'm trying to prove my value through how much I can struggle and still get by.
Right. Yeah.
Think about that for a second. Like, what are we doing? Why on earth are we chaining up all of our energy, our creativity, our life force, our love, energy, all of these things? Why are we caging? I'm like literally in a cage. Why are we caging all of this to instead like drone away and struggle at something? If I have to hear like one more person go, I would be creating this magnificent thing over here if I didn't have to go make money, if I didn't have to go earn a living. I'm sorry, aren't we supposed to be in a society where we have all these technological advances and things are supposed to free us up so that we can make a contribution as our work and not toil through our struggle? I just feel like this is something that I have grappled with a lot. Yeah. And being able to share that and to talk about burnout and to be vulnerable with my team has been one of the largest learning experiences I have ever had. I recently, just this May, we had a leadership meeting. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen in this meeting because here's what I wanted and I prepared for. I prepared to show up and say, guys, I really want to show up as a healer inside of our business. I'd never heard anybody else do that before. That's kind of a wild concept. We know how to respond to that, right? What the heck does that even mean? That's how I want to show up in our business. And I'm doing too much. So I need to scale back in all these areas and I need to work less. That's what I wanted to go tell the team. Now, it just so happens that I have an amazing team, an amazing company, and we spent the whole first day of our 2 days as a leadership team together, just catching up on our lives together. And let me tell you, instead of being the person that spoke first, I was this person that spoke last. And by the time it got to me at the end of the day, every single person in front of me had said, I want to work less. Here's what's going on in my life. Yeah. So I feel like just by showing up with the energy of wanting that to be different in the business, that it can create the space for other people to show up that way too. And then I get what I need, not just what I want, but what my body and my energy and my mind actually need, which is rest and space to create something better.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine having that conversation or saying to my team, I want to be a healer in our business, or that I want to work less, even 6 months ago. I wouldn't have had the awareness or the power of revealing myself enough to be able to articulate and use my voice in that way.
Mm-hmm. Articulate, use your voice in that way, and let go of this old paradigm value story.
That's it.
Because it's, I mean, you see it and hear it all the time. And yes, I mean, we'll get more into this in a second when it comes to new paradigm work, but you know, it's deliberate. We're slaves. Like, we're literally slaves to a system that is truly does not actually care about human thriving. It doesn't. It just can't. By design, it can't. Its intention is on something else, and its attention and obsession is on wealth accumulation, and it's built all kinds of stories to justify that that way of being. And we are, to a certain degree, going to continue to run up against the wall a little bit until that changes. But I do think there are enough people who are awakening to the truth that this overall system, anything that says that it serves you, is truly bullshit. It does not serve. It does not actually care. And it does not actually bring out our creative objectives, right? If you think you have all this power and all this creativity, it goes, what are you going to focus it on? What is the objective of that creativity? To make money. And that's not to heal.
I mean, that's why it's so scary to see all of these brilliant folks
not
in college end up working in finance.
Right. I mean,
so we have like some of the world's most brilliant people who funnel themselves into finance because that's where the money is. That's really the game that we're playing, everyone. That seems so silly and reductive.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
We would stop that, but the story that you let go of, that I've grappled with also in many different phases in my life and career, and where other people are, is this illusion, this wonderful marketing, advertising story that's been created by the United States of America predominantly and spread like a disease, I believe, into other places in the world. And that is, your value comes from how much you produce and how much wealth, and by your status of wealth. And that's our idea of power and true self-worth. And if our self-worth is truly derived and a story is built around that attaches everything to a material existence that doesn't actually really serve you or your life or the people in your life, we can't break out. We can't break out of an old paradigm. We're stuck. We have to let go and break that particular story. And what's great in your example as well, and I think is so powerful, in the optimism that we have to choose, is like, if you can do it, it starts with you. You have to do it. Change that energy within yourself, which takes work because it's really hard because it's programmed.
A lot of work.
Crying, bawling, back and forth. I mean, it's a bit of a bitch, it really is.
It's not pretty work. It's not ladylike, pretty, quick, effortless work. It's really not.
It's really not. It's not. And but once you do that and you do energetically change, you connect to your true value, your true self-worth, which has nothing to do with any of this silliness that has been created around us. Then your energy can change, and it's contagious, as you know, from the behavior and everything. We are contagious. Our behavior physically is contagious, and our energy is contagious. And so we all feel trapped by the same thing, monster, the same dark monster in the closet.
I feel like one of the biggest, illusions that plagues us right now as a whole is this concept of more, better, different. And what that does is it keeps us in this trap of the existing world and paradigm. And it makes it so that we all have this illusion of, if only we can prioritize our life better, if only we can find a better way to do X, if only we can optimize everything, including our self-care, which is ridiculous, if only we can find a different way to manage the team, if only we can find some external strategy or tactic or best practice or method or book that some old white dude read or something out there, there is the answer, is out there. If only we can do something more, better, or different for ourselves and our company and the world, then everything will be great. And more, better, different is ridiculous. More, better, different is only another version of what we've got now.
Exactly.
That's all it is. And, the Einstein quote about, you can't create a solution from the same thinking that the problem was created with. It's so dead simple. I'm sure that quote is so overused by everyone in the worst way, except it's really glaringly obvious.
It is the only thing.
In order to actually have a new paradigm for something, in order to actually envision something new, it is not incremental change. It is not a more, better, or different version of what we've already got. And it is something that requires us to get out of the thinking of what exists. Because what exists does not work. So slightly altering it and hoping and praying that we find a more, better, or different version of it that will like magically make everything better is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And that's how we go about personal development. We have New Year's resolutions and we find ways to optimize every aspect of our lives.
I'll personally develop so that I get the raise, so that I can be the billionaire. I will work on myself so that I feel better or have more money, or again, like all these like external things, instead of like, no, just because you will feel everything extraordinary that you've ever wanted in your entire life when you let it all go. But it's, but I mean, it's so true. And if we talk about the new, I just got overwhelmed. Hold on.
I have more to say if you want.
Yeah, keep going. Hold on, I'll drive back.
Okay. Yeah, so I think for me, what's related to this issue of more, better, different thinking is that we live in this world right now where it is, or it feels, or it's perceived as having like no opportunity to have space to think.
Right. No,
that's how we see things right now. We are all so stressed out, burned out, overwhelmed, and busy. And we celebrate how busy we are. We like wear it like a badge. And that's like a good thing, apparently. That we literally give ourselves no time to think. And what's actually required to create a new world and a new paradigm for business and leadership is space to contemplate and think. And exactly. What do we actually think about during that time is not a more, better, or different version of what we already have. It is setting that aside. So for example, here's just like one version of that for leadership. If I don't have to be either vulnerable or strong as a leader, if I don't have to play that game, am I being vulnerable enough? Am I being strong enough? How am I showing up? Am I teetering back and forth on this spectrum? Am I right in the middle? Am I where I'm supposed to be? If I'm not constantly worried about having to be a certain way, if I can get out of that game that never ends with the voice inside of my head as a leader, for just that one tiny aspect of leadership, I can see that a whole world opens up for me. I don't have to play that game. I don't have to worry about being too vulnerable or too strong or just right. I can just be over here. And from the place of just being, there's so much more possibility. Whereas in the world over here of the spectrum of how I'm supposed to show up as a leader, there were two options, maybe three, for how I could show up, strong or vulnerable or somewhere in the middle. If we give up thinking within the existing structure, then we're free to be. We're free to see bigger possibilities that are available to us. But we have to have space, and we have to be able to say like, oh my gosh, this structure that's put in place was just somebody's idea however many years ago. Someone else spoke it into existence, and now we've accepted it as if it's real. We've agreed that it's real. We're living our life in that construct. But what is it? It's a bunch of words.
It's all imagined.
It's a bunch of words that we've agreed are important. What if we agree they're not important? Or what if we just suspend that for 30 seconds to think about what exists outside of having to be those certain ways?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the type of thinking that we need to get to new paradigm, to envision something new, to step outside of more, better, different.
Yeah. 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 Well, and it makes me think even from, as I've shared with you before, like the last 6 months when I've had to go back into my works, I was still having, even in the creation of the community, the creation of this thing that was to consciously co-create a thriving, it was all the same. I was on the right track. But what happened because of certain, it was within myself as well, my own temptations to make it work within an old paradigm system.
Yep.
Immediately I start having conversations about how it can monetize this fast and focus on the executives, focus over here, and we'll take it in the business direction because artists and, new world sustainable community builders don't have money. They don't have money. And I felt torn for a year because I knew everything was about this new paradigm. I'd already chosen it within myself, but I hadn't been able to I couldn't choose it, or I felt it was really hard for me from a work perspective, work and career and creation, because so many of our creations today are set up within the old paradigm. And so even when you choose it as a leader, you're still, it's like, ugh. But now what? Like, how do I create in a different way? How do I lead, contribute, all of these things? And for 6 months, I had to completely unplug, because it was like, you're still doing old paradigm. You gotta let it go. You gotta let it go.
You have this like glorious, pure, creative, new idea, and then there's all this pressure that just like insidiously creeps back in. You have to make it make money. It has to make money immediately. You have to earn a living. Remember, you have to prove how valuable you are. You can't just be or create something that's worthy and like amazing and serves humans.
And meant to be created, out of a good intention. Yeah,
it's like not only do we have to create this space, not only do we have to do the difficult work of reprogramming ourselves. Frankly, it is a constant reprogramming. It is a constant realization of those traps that you just pointed out, because they don't go away. You just find new levels of them, or you forgot to deal with one for a while and it creeps back in and you're like, oh, how did I get here? What am I doing? You have to swat it away again. Exactly. It's two things. And like, oh my God, everything else is just like closing in on you, right? Because there's so much momentum and so much energy and so many people still bought into what exists, because they're buying into it's possible for them to be successful in this current paradigm. And we have that agreement at a really high societal level. So trying to create something outside of that, people can't wrap their head around it. They can't understand what you're talking about. They can't see the vision because they're still seeing at the level of the current paradigm. And like, unless you do that work on yourself, or you step outside of it, or you say, let's just pretend that this isn't the only way to do something for 5 minutes a day and be curious about what else could possibly exist. Like, no, people aren't doing that. People don't have time. They don't have time for that. They're too busy. Mm-hmm. And so we just keep going in this cycle where everybody is stuck in the current way. Yeah. And, no one wants to feel like they can't be successful.
Right. Well, then we talk about all those core wounds being triggered.
So then there's like a buy-in at a level that still doesn't, like, honest. If we're being honest with ourselves, truly, there's so much disconnection. There's so much cognitive dissonance happening where we are pretending that something is working and we know it's not. We know it's false. And I feel like that is really what's creating so much of the fighting and the hatred and the war and the scarcity in our society. It's that deep down, people really do know.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not either consciously willing or able to acknowledge it, or their ego is protecting them as a mechanism to say, like, no, this is working and I'm successful in it. I can't possibly not be successful. And this is what has been told to me for my entire life. And if I admit that it's not true or that it's not real, then who am I and what value do I have? And I feel like that is that's the field upon which we have to build a new paradigm. And like having an us versus them, coming at people in the same way that we have so much fighting right now happening, is never going to be a way to introduce the new.
No.
So I really do feel like shifting the energy of how you show up as a leader is one really solid, fundamental way to just generously, quietly, gently start to move in the new direction without having to push or force or influence or convince any person. You showing up in a new way that creates space for other people and is an invitation for them to be different without actually asking them or telling them they should be doing it is like the most generous, glorious, abundant thing that you could do, I think, as a leader.
Definitely.
Because it's like an ushering in. It's gentle. It's not a fighting approach. It's like, hey, the flow's going in this direction. Won't you catch on the ferry with me?
Yeah.
As opposed to like, everybody get on the freaking boat. I'm going to push you down the river, whether you want to be on the boat or not.
Exactly.
And so it's not as much as like, we have to have a new paradigm for leadership. We have to have a new paradigm for business and society itself. But we also have to enroll people in a new way.
Well, yes, and what you're speaking to also that I think is so important. Like it's one, yes, female business leaders, especially within their organizations, is a great starting place. Not because men can't. I know a lot of men who are very sensitive and very open, more so than ever these days, and can be fantastic leaders in an intuitive way. It does happen to be that women just tend to be a little bit more open to the work. Just tend to be. Not all of them, not all the time. But as we talk about ushering in, exactly as you're talking about, it's like, well, creating these spaces, which we're going to do in just a second too. I want to talk a little bit about our own little imaginary game of new paradigm, but really, what could this look like?
Yeah.
And but before that, emphasizing what you're saying also right now, and going back to where we were earlier on in the conversation, which is coming into what we can control. In all of this chaos, when we look at the new paradigm and the emerging new paradigm, and a lot of the other story that is really harmful, that I do think has been programmed deliberately as well, because it keeps us out of empowerment and it keeps us in division, is wait for the leader or the savior to show up.
Oh,
This is just the way that it is. There's nothing I can do. It's too big for me, Well, I get it. You're right. Cognitive dissonance. I can see it's not working. I don't, but somebody else has to solve it. Somebody who's smarter, somebody who has more credibility, somebody who has a bigger following, and this is the shift. The shift that we're talking about is nobody's coming. Anybody who comes in to save us these days, anybody that comes in with a Superman, I'm like, watch out. You watch out.
what do they want, really?
What do they want? This is not a new paradigm. This is not a new paradigm. You look at every single action and how they show up, and we're done with saviors. We're done with other people doing it. None of this is going to shift until each of us starts to choose to do the work ourselves, and to stop and to do exactly what you're saying too, which is choose the possibility. It's not working. It can get better. It really can. We got a lot of really smart, capable people.
Yeah.
They just don't believe that they're the ones to do it.
Yeah. I think it's crazy to think how new some of the structures that we feel like have been around forever are. Like grocery stores.
Yeah.
Relatively new. Like grid, relatively new. All of these things that we take for granted, that you can just go and get food any time of the year at the grocery store and it's typically always stocked with the same stuff. That's really new. Also a little strange, if I might add, but we won't go there. But that stuff's new, but we act like it has always existed. And as a result, we get further and further and further removed from survival. And I don't mean like scraping to get by or like having to go out and hunt a deer, which are reasonable things. But I mean like knowing how to be in a society with other humans where you contribute to things that actually matter.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So like if we don't know where our food comes from or how to make a piece of clothing or how to repair things, or we don't even have things are repairable, it just makes me a little concerned because it feels like we have bought in so deeply to something that is like visibly crumbling in front of our eyes right now. Like that feels like a negative thing to say out loud, but I actually feel like it's positive in many ways.
Definitely, yeah.
Giant foundational societal structures are crumbling in front of us. The idea of a savior or a leader that's like here to save the day, or, you know, a country being the one that's like saving people and protecting them and taking care of them just feels like such an old idea. And I feel like people are buying into these things less and less. Some consciously, and they're like, oh, these things are not working. Something else will have to come new. And some are like grappling with it, trying to fight it and trying to kill it and try to extinguish it. And we're seeing a lot of that. And it's kind of frightening. The way that these things do actually go away. It seems to never be peaceful, unfortunately. Like we haven't figured that out yet, which I feel like that needs to be next on our list, people. Yeah. Okay. Like, hey, this isn't working. Let's not freak out. Let's just find a better way. It doesn't have to result in people dying or a war or like all of this fighting. What? Like, let's get there soon, hopefully. But I guess I just feel like all this stuff is crumbling and we don't have a connection to what really matters. And you were talking about earlier that this like new paradigm for work, like what is work? And I feel like one of the beliefs out there, or like the lies I feel like is perpetrated, is that if people don't have jobs, that they'll just suck on the system and people are lazy and people will just drag us down and no one will be contributing anything. I'm sorry. I don't think I've ever actually met a human that wants to literally do nothing. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that is one of the biggest untruths that exists. And I think it exists because we can only see the world and work and how you get money and value through this structure we already have. But I think like deep down, people love to have meaning and purpose, and they love to help other people. Like every single person. That's kind of what we're here for. And I feel like this idea of work has been co-opted so much to be so individualized. We have, especially in the United States, these extremely individualized lives. We're repeating everything. We're stressing ourselves out as a result. We all have to have separate households. We all have to do our own laundry. We'll all have to raise our own children. We all have to have 3 cars individually. Everyone has to have a separate bedroom. We all have separate TVs in the rooms. Like, what? We're duplicating so much work for ourselves, people. Can you imagine, like, I don't know, living in a neighborhood where people took turns watching the kids or making them lunches, or and this sounds like hippie stuff. It's reasonable. Why would you not want to have like, you know what? I actually really jam on doing some laundry because when I do it, I get to like listen to music and think about really cool ideas, and I get to chit chat with my friend over here and we make a game of it. And so like, everybody bring your laundry to my house. I'm going to do it every Saturday. Can you imagine how much that would free up just that one little thing? And that feels so disconnected and so odd and so at odds with how we currently do things that it's like, ooh, no. we have to relinquish control over our laundry in order for that to happen. That's not weird. Let other people touch my stuff. And what if people are really into that? And this, like, having to control every little thing that doesn't matter means that we're not in control of the one thing that does matter, which is how we show up and how we respond.
Exactly. Beautiful. Yeah.
It's just like, there's so much possible out here if we focus on the right stuff.
Right. And you know what, I think it's all a little bit big, because we're in this mess and everything hasn't disrupted from the material. We are still used to going to our grocery stores, right? It's the same thing with, like, we look at, not that I know a ton, so I will say I'm not a specialist by any means on foreign policy with, nations that are struggling or, can't feed themselves, right? Like, we have this idea of, like, a community can't feed themselves. And it's like, because you told them they can't. Yeah. That's the most ridiculous thing on the planet. Like, yes, if certain land is not habitable, if you can't plant, if you can't find food, then it's probably not the place to be set up. But, like, wait, what? When do we people of their basic sovereignty to know how to build a shade over their head and eat food, which, by the way, if you buy at the grocery store, is $1,000 when you check out in the West. It's like, and they're like, well, this only for the special, for, like, the privileged ones that get, like, the farmers. And I'm, what? What is this craziness?
The fact that it's a privilege to have organic produce available to you should be a very clear indication of how distorted things have become. I think, like I said a second ago, grocery stores are relatively new as an idea. They are. What did we do before that? Oh, I don't know. People had gardens in their yards. People didn't have lawns. Yep. They actually grew food, and they stored it in really ingenious and simple ways so that they had it all year round.
Yep.
And they shared it with neighbors. And, like, I mean, this stuff is really simple, guys. But right now, it's unimaginable. And it's unimaginable because we're all so busy. And because we are all trying to do everything individually, that there is so much overwhelm to even consider not being able to go to the grocery store, let alone not being able to have, like, meal delivery to your house, or go to the grocery store and buy everything prepared already. Or, like, we've gotten to the point where it's like you outsource every part of your life, but not in a constructive way, not in a way that saves and is actually efficient and contributes to society and doesn't have waste.
And engages with creativity and soul.
Exactly. The way we're doing it is soulless right now. It creates so much waste, and it's so inefficient, and it just feels like extraction, as opposed to what would it look like if someone in your neighborhood did meal prep for everyone,
right,
every week. Like, think about the difference of that versus every single person going to the grocery store and buying prepped stuff, and how much, like, wasted container, where that had to be shipped from. Like, think about the difference of just those two things.
Yep.
It's just, like, simple stuff like that. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
Yeah. Well, as we look at, the minimalistic movement, which came up in many ways as kind of a backlash response to how we have created overcomplicated lives.
Yep.
That we then have to afford with salaries, which you have to choose jobs and work that are of the higher salary, right? Because it's not just, you have to overwork. You need a certain kind of work before you can actually pay your bills too. Because if you're a teacher, if you're this, you really can't have very much of that other stuff. You can't outsource most of your life. Everybody, and this gets back to some of that old, again, this storytelling, this old paradigm, really destructive storytelling that has been designed. Well, there's all kinds of theories on why it's been designed, but I'll go with the most logical, seemingly obvious one, which is industry.
Yeah.
And industry going through mass scaling and manufacturing, and then bringing in a bunch of creatives and storytellers who are really good at telling people, programming minds and giving people new stories to think about, and putting these really talented storytellers to work on why we need this new way of being to support industry. And the, even what you pointed out too, and when you say like a lot of people are like, what? Like, that's like hippie culture, or like we have this fear of like going back to tribes. Because again, in our storytelling, we've been like more evolved society. Like if I'm going to be like a real person, like then I need, this has to be super clean. This has to look this way. It's all poisonous storytelling. It's all this programming to make us distance ourselves from our core needs, from our self-sovereignty, from our community sovereignty, from our ability to actually take care of ourselves.
Yep. There's been a really, really, really great PR campaign going on for the last 100 or so years, focused on telling you what progress looks like.
Exactly.
And let me just tell you, it is not what we've got right now.
No.
We need a cold, hard look at progress, what meaningful progress is. It's certainly not having more stuff. It's certainly not living in these individual pocketed lives that we've got with bubble children that know nothing about anything. I see this, like when I lived in Chicago in the city all the time, I just thought to myself, I call them bubble children. I just would witness over and over a child that literally went from their extremely expensive residence to a car, living in the middle of one of the biggest cities in the United States, in a car, to their gorgeous, lovely school a few blocks away, out of the car, up the stairs into the school. The school's done. Okay, up, and back into the car, maybe to a Starbucks, back into the car, and then back home. That's it. No exposure to the culture around them, no exposure to different types of people, no like being able to have autonomy and walk around or use public transit or know how to, I don't know, be a sovereign being, as you indicated. Bubble children. What are we doing? I feel like I was one of the last rounds of children that got to exist without all this crazy technology invading my life. I got to be outside. I got to like come in when the street lights came on. I got to roam free. I got to ride my bike into town. I got, like you had some freedom. You had some like ability to figure stuff out on your own. You had like ability to go make out who you were in the world. And our children don't have that now. Now, even more, we have their eyeballs captured into this like PR nightmare of here's what progress looks like. Here's what it looks like to be successful. Here's what you need to do in order to win. And it's terrifying.
Technology, media, it really is. On the darker side of things, which I think is important to see, we have to see clearly. Just like when we talk about the healing process, so what you do individually with leaders, when we're facing and we're healing ourselves, so many people think that the spiritual awakening and the movement, and it's all like, I'm amazing, I'm in power, I'm so great. And no, it's like looking in the mirror and going, whew, sheesh. There's some darkness. There's some shit that I gotta clear out. There's like, I do have beauty and I have all this light and I have all this goodness in me, and I'm also capable of some not great things, and I need to be able to see them before I can have compassion for them.
I think that something good is emerging from bubble children. I know I went off on a tangent there, but I think something also good is happening with that generation, which is that they're more sensitive.
Very.
They're getting social emotional learning in school, and they're focused on inclusion. Now, like, does the PC stuff take it a little far? Does the cancel culture take it way too far? Of course. But we're seeing like an entire generation of humans grow up and have an aversion to how busy, overwhelming, and anxiety inducing our existence is right now.
Yeah.
And they literally, like, physically and mentally and emotionally can't handle it.
Yeah.
I'm watching it. My husband's a high school teacher. I'm seeing it. I'm getting the stories of it. And right now, because of all of our conditioning and the current society, we're like, well, they're going to have to tough it out. They're going to have to figure it out. They're going to, like, all those stories are coming in as a result. And it's like, well, no, actually, maybe they are like this. There is an emergence of this as a phenomenon because it's a great gift. And it's going to actually make society have to change, because we're going to have a whole generation of people that need to be chill and are too sensitive to deal with the overwhelming stuff that, for some reason, the generations before us and our generation, I feel like especially, have been like, oh yeah, pile it on. We can take it more. Keep putting it on. We can still do it. We're still going to win. We can do everything. And like, we aren't waking up out of that yet as a whole. And we've got to shift. And I feel like that has a huge societal potential to usher in that shift.
From a, a little bit of out there spiritual cosmic kind of stuff for a second, there is a lot too, as we talk about our planet kind of raising in its vibration as we're shifting into no matter what level of consciousness or whatever storytelling is most comfortable for an individual, right? Like a very logical 3D look at things, or as we kind of stretch into other potentials and intuitive understandings of what's happening right now. So as our consciousness is rising, generally there's a panic that's happening because you start to see things and experience the world very differently.
Right.
And there is a lot of talk about how the youth, like this younger generation, also is naturally just of a higher frequency. I don't know for sure, but it seems to be. I definitely see a lot of that, and like you're saying, I think, they're coming in sensitive because they're learning. It's emotional learning. I think there is a little bit of learning from the past as well. There's nothing wrong with learning resilience. If you burn, you will heal. Sometimes you got to push through. Sometimes you do have to understand. It's just for what reason?
For what reason? Exactly.
Yes. Is the shift like, nah, not for your work, not for this, for society and humanity as a whole, and to hold people accountable and to really make sure, like, now I can be resilient. Like now is the time to activate that. Now is the time to understand that we can be a little bit tough, but be tough with the right reasons. And that, I hope you're right. And I do think that the younger generation, that despite being so glued into all of this media and all this technology, because they are getting rapid exposure and they may be coming in at higher frequencies as well, they should still develop faster critical. They should be able to see beyond what we've been, to think faster and more critically than maybe generations before them.
Goodness, I hope so. Because I feel there's a meme floating around out there that's like, why am I sitting in school all day? Why are you telling me I need to go to college? Like, literally, the earth's on fire. Is no one else doing this? Like, we're still kind of like putting them in the same box, in the same system that we went through, in the same, like, go sit in school 8 hours a day and take this standardized test, and nobody actually knows what a career will be like when you get out of here, but we're just going to keep moving you through this factory line. And they're all like, but the world's on fire. Like, why am I doing this? And so I feel like there's a little bit of that resistance already happening, which points to exactly what you just said. It's like, for what? For what end? To what end? For what meaning? For what purpose am I willing to sacrifice? For what purpose? For what end am I willing to struggle? Am I willing to have anxiety? Am I willing to be resilient? And I feel like up until this point, we've all sacrificed everything because we should, because we've been told we're supposed to, and because that's been the road that's been paved in front of us. And I feel like finally we're starting to wake up, some of us, to recognize that that is something we don't have to agree with anymore, and that there's more possibility out there for us. So I have biggest hopes that the incoming generations can have a different path that's worn down from them, for them. And that we can stop this cycle.
Oh, we can.
I know.
Continue. I think we should maybe do a little wrap up here on part 1. But I want us, if I'm talking to Bree as I'm talking to anybody who's watching right now, or will be watching, we'll continue the conversation on what is the new paradigm of quote unquote work, and how do we start to create space for it within ourselves and within and at business work, within the collectives that currently exist, and how we're showing up every day. And we'll kind of play around with some imaginary things, sequences too, of just like, really, And if anybody, please like, share, all the things for the video. And if you want to connect with Bree or learn more about the series or anything else, there's a bunch of links and descriptions in the description box below. Thank you, friend, for joining me today.
Thank you, friend, for inviting me and holding this space.
You're so welcome. I'm glad to have you. And we'll be chatting again soon.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right. Bye.
Bye.